Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. I wanted to end this week with a tribute to my best friend of 40 plus years, Stephen A. Cox, who passed away a year ago. I didn't have a chance because of the coming of COVID-19 to give him a proper tribute. And so, with your permission, I want to spend a few minutes just telling you a little bit about my best friend, Steve. You couldn't have a better friend than Steve Cox. I first met Steve Cox in 1978 when we were both watching the news in the basement of our first year residence, Sydenham in Western. It was a news program about the uprising in Iran. We were the only two people that were fascinated about what was going on. We started arguing about politics that night, and for the next 40 years, we never stopped arguing about politics. Liberal versus green, progressive versus moderate, gay rights, guns, genetically modified foods. We never stopped arguing. Political commentator. In 1980, in our first year of Ivy HBA, my biggest luck in life was to have Steve sit beside me all year long in the alphabetical arrangement that was what Ivy demanded. We had a stroke of luck. We both did. We talked every day and we quickly became best friends. We traveled together and dined together and drank our fair share of red wine together. Best friend. Sitting on the other side of Steve was my nemesis in class, and Steve played peacemaker, another role he played over and over again, peacemaker. And sitting on the other side of me in class was Suzanne Curtis, an impressive young woman who had an award at Ivy named for her. And the three of us became great friends. Another wonderful trait of Steve's, wingman. Steve did research for a favorite finance professor, Sam Martin, on a book on philanthropy and recruited me to research and read a chapter. He was always helping me find extra gigs at Ivy, at DeGroote, at the Director's College. Steve was completely unselfish, always sharing his opportunities and contacts. Generous and unselfish. He went off to Nairobi, Kenya with Ivy, traveled across several countries in Africa, researching and writing cases. And did you know that Steve was cast as an extra in the movie Out of Africa, world traveler and film star? On moving back to Toronto, Steve launched a career writing cases for several business schools, Ivy, Rotman, and recently DeGroote, but also companies such as RBC, the ICDC Institute for Directors, and the Directors College. Steve was wickedly smart, a great interviewer, quick with his analysis of what was going on, what was going wrong at whatever company he was researching. And he was an incredibly good writer, case writer. Steve loved movies and went often. He would call me up and ask to skip work and catch a matinee with him. He would buy passes to TIFF and see 2 or 3 movies a day for the entire festival. He could tell you the exact day and place a decade or two ago that the two of us saw a movie together. Movie lover. Steve loved bad music, the Smiths, punk and alternative rock, CFNY. He has a cassette and CD collection that's in the thousands, if not the tens of thousands. He went to hundreds of concerts that started at 11 p.m. and you had to stand on beer-soaked floors, but he loved it. And again, he could remember every concert, the date, who he went with, and some incident of what happened. Music lover. And Steve loved the news, current events, CNN, some internet chat space I didn't even know existed. He was up to speed on absolutely everything. We called some of our chats Steve's podcast updates because he was better at giving me a quick critical review of what was happening in the world than any other source. He had an insatiable thirst for knowledge and natural curiosity about the variety of subjects. He was an eternal student. He cut out articles and saved them. He kept magazines. He kept everything he found, anything interesting, news junkie, and devoured books. He did. Every Christmas and birthday, we exchanged presents, and they were always books, and often the same book. He read and he critiqued and he absorbed and he would talk about. Steve would have made a great book editor and promoter, book lover. He read, edited, and critiqued every one of my articles, speeches, and interviews. Steve loved working as a team, not only with me, but with many different people. He loved collaborating. In the car, Steve would pull out his laptop and we would write speeches together. Policy platforms are part of my thesis. He was always thinking and creating, thinker, creator, collaborator. And I can't talk about Steve without mentioning his passion for politics. Liberal and then Green, Toronto mayoralty candidates, and Liberal leadership candidates. We wrote speeches together for more than half a dozen politicians. Steve ran call centers in campaign after campaign across Canada and in Australia as well. He knew what he liked in a politician and what he didn't. Steve and I got together every election night at the keg and debated the results. For us, Super Tuesday was like everyone else's Super Bowl, political junkie. He was a progressive. He loved Bernie Sanders, Jerry Brown, and Ralph Nader. And if you mentioned strategic voting or splitting the vote, he'd say, heresy, heresy, vote for who you want. He believed strongly in freedom of choice in almost everything except pollution. He became green and almost religious about his adherence to green philosophy. Progressive Steve. For some strange reason, he liked strong women. They got him to buy homes, cottages, work on campaigns, dog sit, and watch Knots Landing, Dallas, 90210, and many other shows he talked to me about that I never had any clue about. Pop culture fan. And he loved to talk. Boy, could Steve talk. He loved driving with me to my house in Long Island so we could talk for 10 hours straight. Seriously, 10 hours. And when we arrived, he'd ask me to drive around the block so we could continue talking and finish the conversation. We talked every day, most of the time, twice or 3 times a day. He complained if I called while driving, as he wanted my undivided attention. But then he'd talk my whole commute from Toronto to Mississauga and still not be finished. Call me before you go to sleep, he'd say, over and over. He'd come for the weekend and he'd have a cue card with conversation topics listed on it. He'd tell my kids, we're going to talk for 10 hours nonstop, and they would quickly put their earbuds on. Steve loved to talk. But he would also listen and give great advice, non-judgmental, supportive, and loving advice. When my life was challenged either with work issues or love life issues, Steve was always there, always unconditional. Unconditional love with Steve. One of my favorite days of the week was date night with Steve. We enjoyed many steak dinners and bottles of wine, debating politics and current events for hours. He would often joke that we had great idea sex. Steve had a wonderful sense of humor. Dinner companion. He loved my family as his own. He was my son Jonathan's godfather, and no one took that responsibility more seriously than Steve. He always called my daughter Natasha Yar, head of security. He tried to set up my son Alex with his niece. When that didn't work, he tried my nephew. He came to my mom's birthday parties and was part of our family. He stayed over countless times, enjoying pea-meal bacon, copious amounts of coffee, and the newspaper. He loved taking our family dog Adonis out for long walks and dog sitting. He took the time to visit my dying uncle and my aging cousin. But I think he was like this with several people. Renata, Russ, Lindsay, Christina, and the rest of his family. Steve loved them. The 60th birthday party he had for them, they had for him, was incredibly special. Steve was a family man. Steve Cox was my best friend, my confidant, my editor, my counselor, my cheerleader, my wingman, and my backbone. I will miss him desperately. Steve and I were soulmates. But much more, Steve was many people's best friends, confidants, and counselors. The world has lost a great man. I will miss him every day. But typical for Steve, he made a statement by being born on the 29th and saying goodbye on February 29th, which will make us remember all the more. Make us remember him all the more every leap year. Goodbye, dear friend, good friend. Steve Cox, rest in peace. Well, that's my show for tonight. Next week, starting Monday, March 15th, I go to a new time on Saga 960 AM. I go to 7 p.m. every Monday through Friday. That's Saga 960 AM, or you can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca, or all my podcasts and video casts are on my website, briancrombie.com, or you can get my podcasts on saga960am.ca, or on Apple Podcasts, or even on Spotify, and my video casts on YouTube. Hope you listen to me. Thanks for joining me. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend.